I'm Marcy Winograd. Welcome. It's wonderful to be here today with Helena Pasquarella. Helena hails from Ojai. She is a peace candidate running for Congress to represent us in the 24th Congressional District. That's from Ventura up through Santa Barbara to San Luis Obispo, Lompoc, all sorts of communities, wonderful communities in between. So first, welcome, Helena. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me here today, Marcy. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Yeah. So, Helena, a lot of people may have already voted, but a lot of people haven't voted. Election day is Tuesday, March 5th, when people will actually go to the polls who want to vote in person. And a lot of people are wondering, who is Helena Pasquarella and why is she running for Congress? So tell us, Helena Pasquarella, why are you running for Congress?
Well, I believe that our government hasn't been working for us for quite some time. And I've been frustrated, actually, with my representative, Salud Carbajal, and his connection to the military-industrial complex. I've been a peace activist for many years. I've worked with refugees. I work with community centers here in my community, working to spread the information about what the military has done in the past and what it continues to do now. And so I felt that we needed to have a choice. I wanted you to have a choice out there, and a choice for peace, and something different than what we've been used to. Right now, we're spending $886 billion a year on the military. Right now in Congress, there's another bill up for $95 billion for the war in Israel with the Palestinians, and for Ukraine, and for Taiwan. So it's just this endless cycle of wars that the government keeps funding because there's money in it. And we need to divest from the military economy, and we need to focus at home in a peace economy. We have so many needs here of the unhoused. They say that the housing situation could be fixed with $20 billion. And yet we're sending $14 billion right now in this supplemental bill to Israel. So we just have to make our priorities right and moral and just.
I hear you, Helena. I think that you would be a voice for our district to advocate for the Green New Deal. You know, what we have been learning about from other lawmakers, progressives in Congress, is that we need a Green New Deal. We need to fund jobs in housing, healthcare, education, a new infrastructure for an alternative to these fossil fuels, good paying jobs in solar, wind, and so forth. And that sounds like what you're talking about. You know, it's really a travesty when you think about it, that 34 million Americans don't know where their next meal will come from. And as you said, so many people without housing, the homeless and so forth. What would you do to address the issue of homelessness?
So that is an issue that we're dealing with here right now in Ojai and in Santa Barbara and in Ventura. So it's something that's right here in front of us. What we need to do is, first of all, divest and make our priorities straight, okay? And we need to invest in our people. So what we need to do is see why. What are the factors that these people are homeless? Well, the rent is too high, right? The jobs don't pay enough. So we need to make sure that people are making a living wage. We need to make sure that their healthcare doesn't cost an arm and a leg. In addition, usually people have healthcare, but even now the state healthcare, you have to pay for it, part of it. My friend who's a bartender, she was telling me she has to pay $400 additional, and it's the state Obamacare. So something's wrong with the system. It's not working. So we have to look at these factors when people aren't making enough money to pay the rent. So we need a voucher program, perhaps. That would help. We need to have funded housing from the government. We need to have programs that help people get jobs, get job training. We need to have mental health programs. That's another big issue, that even in healthcare, there's not enough funding for the mental health care portion of their healthcare, of their insurance. And that seems to be one of the major issues I see, is that, especially with the youth, there's a lot of anxiety and depression and just lack of a purpose. So we need to change our society, like from the ground up, and start with our people and work on those issues, social issues especially.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because we certainly need a new direction in the 24th Congressional District. We have Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, a number of military contractors whose main purpose is to produce more weapons for death and destruction. Others would say, oh, it's for defense. But I don't use the word defense because, as you mentioned, we have 800 military bases around the world. We've had endless wars, endless bombings of multiple countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and now we are aiding and abetting genocide in Israel, in Gaza, by sending all these weapons to Israel and not supporting a ceasefire.
Exactly.
Now, Salud Carbajal, the incumbent, will not support a permanent ceasefire. What about you?
Well, that's something that's very timely, actually. I belong to an organization here in my town, and it's called Ohio Ceasefire Now. And what we did is we actually went to our city council, and we've been doing it for 3.5 months now, going back and forth trying to get a resolution passed, because our government officials in Washington are not listening to us. So what we did is decided to make an action locally. We've been educating people, we've been talking to the city council, and finally, after 3.5 months, last night, the bill passed. And so we have a resolution, a city resolution, asking for a permanent ceasefire. But it was a struggle because we have a conflicted sex in our own community. So we had to deal with that here. And in the end, our council members chose to fight for justice and recognize that human lives are what is important, not politics, that children, women, men, innocent people are dying with our tax dollars. And so I am so supportive of ceasefire. We need to stop using war as a tool of diplomacy. It's not. So we need to have diplomacy, and we need to have discussions and find some other way to make war illegal. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I think that's what we need to do. We need to also make nuclear weapons illegal. We need to bring that down as well. There's also a proposal to improve the nuclear weapons program, and they're going to spend $1 trillion on that. So
Oh,
we
probably
just
more than $1 trillion. They call it nuclear modernization, such a euphemism,
exactly
right? This is
right.
not modernization. This is a violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So the United States is now in violation and escalating this arms race. And there is a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So they are actually illegal. And what we are doing in the United States is illegal. In investing in these new nuclear weapons. Northrop Grumman, that has an office in our district, it has the sole source contract. Of course, they subcontracts to a lot of other military contractors. I never say defense. We don't say defense contractors. That's a misnomer. So I
Right.
appreciate your voice, Helena. I want to just skip for a moment to this issue of fentanyl, because that's another big issue in this district all over the country, right? We see these.
Right.
Now, Salud Carbajal, your opponent, he has co-sponsored a bill, championed a bill to work with the Department of Defense to go after these cartels and further criminalize the use of fentanyl. What do you think? Is this
So that's a place where we have a different view of the world. And so what he's doing is looking at the supply side of the issue, right? So he's saying, okay, we're going to go after the drug dealers. We're going to use the military strength. We're going to stomp them out, and then there'll be no more drug problems. But that's not what happens, because you need to say, well, if you get rid of the supply, the demand, which is the people here in the United States, are still wanting and craving this drug, right? It's the #1 killer of youth between 18 and 40 years old in our country right now is fentanyl use. So we have to look at the reasons, and that's where these social mental health programs, talking to people, why are you doing this? And I was talking to a woman who's a drug counselor, and she was saying, they're not gonna, because I said, oh, there's these little strips that you can put on the thing, and they'll tell you they only cost $1. And she's like, they're not going to be using little strips when they're high and taking a drug. She goes, you have to talk to them before they even start the drug, right? And we need to have Narcan in everybody's home so that everybody has this, so that if they do take it, that we can save them right away. But we need to look at the demand side and get rid of that. Why is it that people are using that? And we aren't really working on those social problems here, because we think that the military is the way to solve everything, right? So we're going to go get the cartels in Mexico, use the military again. There's more money in that than actually coming home and dealing with why. Why are these drugs being used?
I appreciate you saying that, because I agree the war on drugs has been a miserable failure. So to continue this, on steroids makes absolutely no sense. It's counterproductive.
Right.
I'd like to ask you about yourself because people want to know about you personally. Who are you? Who is Helena Pasquarella? Where is she from? What has she done? So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. So I am the child of immigrants. My mother was from Brazil, and my father actually was the child of a Italian immigrant. So I'm first generation on my mom's side, second generation on my father's side from Italy. I have a different view of the world because my mother took me to Brazil when I was a child growing up, and I lived there for a while. And there was immense poverty there. And I was always really sensitive to that issue of social justice. And I always wondered why it was so harsh and so different from here and there. So I was always very sensitive about that. And then in high school, I did programs with farm workers, and in college, I did research about refugees and farm workers, and I worked with programs teaching refugees English who were refugees from Nicaragua and El Salvador and Guatemala from the wars that the US was supporting back then, and caused all these refugees to come here to our country, and because LA was a sanctuary city. I was also involved in the anti-apartheid movement. So that's where I got my training in activism and in just social justice. And I was able to do a research project, and I went abroad and actually went to those countries where the refugees were from and did research on that. And so after that, I came home and I did a project, a journalism project, and had exhibits and spoke to people about the wars that we were supporting all over the world. And so here we are again, 35 years later, and it's still happening, right? And I'm just finally decided I've got to do something. I've always done things like calling people and talking, and calling my senators and calling my representatives, but it wasn't enough. So I felt I really need to do something. And then I submitted my paperwork October 2nd. I was also a school teacher. One of the things that I've done in my life is I've been a photojournalist and a school teacher. And most recently, I was a high school teacher. And I wanted to get the youth involved. One of the problems in our system is that 30% of the people aren't voting. So we have a lot of people who are disenfranchised and don't believe that their votes count. And I thought, I want to get out there and let them know I can run for Congress. So can you. You know, if I can do it, you can do it too. And I wanted to show the experience. So I submitted my paperwork October 2nd, and then October 7th happened. And that changed the focus of my campaign completely, because now it was real. And I needed to really focus and say, no, I need to do this. And I really need to be committed to trying to win and trying to change the system and trying to get in there and give hope to other people and let them know that we can get into Washington and we can change this, and we have to turn this around. And the only way we can do it is that people like you and me get involved in the system and change it. So that's why I'm here.
I appreciate you running and to be our voice, the voice for peace in Congress, the voice for sanity, for investment in urgent human needs, not endless war. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Marcy. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Bye. Peace.